Hi guys, so I thought I'd make a short video to talk about teaching grammar methods. I know I posted a lot of other videos for this week. The main ones in your activities are either talking about common methods of grammar instruction or giving examples of those methods, and I thought they were really good, so that's why I posted them. I also posted a lot of extra videos under extra materials, so don't feel like you have to watch them, but maybe keep them in the back of your mind for a rainy day because there's so much information about grammar instruction in ESL, and there are so many differing viewpoints that it kind of gets overwhelming. And I guess I just kind of picked the main ones just to kind of show you what's going on. So in the extra materials, there's a video by Stephen Krashen, who is mentioned in your chapter on teaching, and he was kind of the grammar teaching guru when I was in graduate school 20 years ago, which is unfortunate because I don't agree with Stephen Krashen at all. But I mean, although there's some good stuff in his theories, but his main overall theory, and I thought I'll go over this while I'm telling you about those other videos, is his input hypothesis. And basically, he talks about there are two ways to learn language. And those of you who took my 105 class know this already, that there's acquisition, and that's what children do. When we're growing up in our culture, we interact with our caregivers and we acquire our language, right? We're not explicitly taught grammar. We just acquire it and therefore use it correctly. And then there's learning, which is really the conscious accumulation of knowledge, which I believe is how Krashen puts it, but that's what it is. And his whole theory stated that adults should be taught in a way that mirrors the acquisition that children have. So kind of like immersion, that if you give them a lot of good comprehensible input, so input that's interesting and that uses the language correctly, adults will acquire the language. And so he basically calls for no explicit grammar instruction. And that, when I was in graduate school, that was the favored theory. So you had all these programs that did not explicitly teach grammar. And now, 20 years later, a lot of people in linguistics are saying, well, that took the field back 20 years. And I agree with that. I believe that you must explicitly teach grammar. I'm just trying to put my words together as to why this is. So you may have students, we get students occasionally who have been in the US for many years. Maybe they came in middle school or in high school, and they speak the language very well. They almost sound like native speakers. But when they have to write something academically, there are many grammar mistakes, such as no real ability to choose the correct verb tense, things like that, and verb forms. And when you think about someone coming to the US in middle school or high school, that's immersion. You're you're immersed in the culture and language. You have friends that you interact with every day, yet they don't reach grammatical competence. And study after study shows this too, that immersion is not enough. You have to explicitly teach grammar for a student to reach grammatical competence. Okay, so that's the start of, so that's Stephen Krashen, a big person in linguistic theory. The second video I posted under extra activities is with Keith Folse and Betty Azar. And Betty Azar she writes a lot of grammar books, and ones that we use at Harper. They really focus on form and kind of the gradual learning of different forms, which a lot of people say that's not how students naturally learn. Nevertheless, I love her books. Nevertheless, she's a big name in teaching grammar, and Keith Folse also. He has written a lot of really great ESL textbooks, and they're supportive of explicit grammar teaching. And they do a panel discussion of it that I've posted under extra materials. So you can listen to the two very different viewpoints on ideas of teaching grammar. So now you're probably wondering, well, what's right? What do we do? Right? There's all these different theories. Well, really recent studies show that explicit grammar teaching is best for students to reach grammatical competence. Now, we know that when you introduce a form to a student, they don't just grasp it and immediately go out and use it correctly and write it correctly. That doesn't happen. It takes a long time for a student to be introduced to a form, and there's a lot of time between then and when they can actually use it correctly. How long is that time? It differs from student to student. Okay? So what's the solution? The solution is to use as many different methods and as many different ways to show the students different forms. So what that means, your book mentions that most ESL books focus on forms, and they immediately go into, okay, what are the rules? And then your book also mentions, is that better to just tell students rules, or is it better for them to have inductive instruction where you give them natural examples and they figure out the rules themselves? It doesn't matter. Both of those are really good. Okay, so when you introduce a new form, I do different ways. Sometimes I introduce the new form by giving them examples, that comprehensible input in writing and in speaking, and I ask them to figure out the rules. Sometimes they can, sometimes they can't, and then I can tell them. Or you can explicitly tell them the rules. And then a lot of books have those written exercises where you fill in the blanks, or you write sentences. Those are good for students to get used to the form, but now they need to learn how to use it. And again, that's not going to happen right away. So the best way for them to use it is practice, practice, practice. And that's where the natural practice comes in. So that's where things in the communicative language teaching comes in. Make sure the students work in groups, work with partners, and give them activities that allows for natural language use while also using the form. Give them task-based activities where you give them some task to do together in which they use the form, or have them write paragraphs or some sort of natural written activity like planning something together to make them use the form. Also work on editing. Okay, have them switch papers and check to make sure if their partners use the form correctly. Have them go back to that those original good examples and see if theirs compares. Theirs compares. That sounded strange. So the more they use that form and the more naturally, the faster they should become competent in that form. So this kind of mixes that communicative language teaching, task-based learning, and what Noonan called grammar and context, where you expose them to authentic language. So a lot of grammar books nowadays have exposure to natural language. So a lot of them have listening components where students can listen to the forms in a conversation, or they have reading. And you as the teacher can also bring those things in. So play short videos that have the form, or bring in some sort of article that has the form in it. So expose them to authentic language. Then explain the form, or explain the form first and then give them lots of examples. Then also what Noonan says is give them lots and lots and lots of opportunities to use the form through speaking, collaborating, writing. And collaboration is a big part of ESL, EFL teaching. The teacher is the facilitator. You teach them the form, you give them activities and tasks in task-based learning to do, whether it be in partners or in groups. And then you walk around and listen to them and help them. But in TESOL teaching, the teacher is the facilitator. You're not up there to lecture the whole time, because the students need to learn the language and to use the language. You don't need to do that. Okay? I'm just looking at what else Noonan said. Yeah, give them opportunities for collaboration and give them opportunities to revise. Okay? Let them learn how to notice their own mistakes, because that's a part of grammatical competence. As I said in an earlier video, that I always get excited when my higher levels, they're giving a presentation and they stop and then they correct a mistake that they said. That's grammatical competence. And not just in speaking, but in writing too. You want them to learn to recognize their mistakes. Otherwise, when they get into their regular college courses, or high school or whatever level you're teaching, they're going to be in the tutoring center the whole time if they can't edit their own work. So that's a big part of it too. The comprehension part, understanding the form in that comprehensible input. The usage part, okay, whether it be something that isn't natural, like filling in blanks or writing those sentences, just to get the form. And then the natural usage part, have them collaborate with other students on tasks and speaking and writing, or writing on their own. And then the editing and the correcting part. All of those pieces go together for grammatical competence. Okay, so I think for now that's all I wanted to tell you. But so the other activities this week, you've got examples of Noonan's approach to teaching grammar and context, communicative language teaching, and task-based language teaching. So I would say that a mixture of those three are what we do today and what we do in Harper. Under extra materials, I have Stephen Krashen talking about his theory that I don't agree with, but I thought I'd put it in there to be fair. And then we have Keith Fultz and Betty Azar talking about the importance of explicit grammar teaching. I'm trying to think if I missed anything, because there's so much. Oh, I also put, because your book also mentions Van Patten, who's also a well-respected teacher in the field. I have a plenary with all of his theories, and we'll come back to him too. So when we go through specific forms, we'll come back to him and watch some videos that show his ideas on specifically how to teach those forms. So this is just a real quick overview of teaching methods, but when we go through the different forms, we'll talk a little bit more about different activities and things you can do to teach those forms.